No one cares.
Here we go. We're live. Yeah. Welcome to another episode of Command Control Power. We are recording this on YouTube. So if you want to see the video of this show, you can go to commandcontrolpower.com and look for the YouTube link. That's not there yet, but it will be, we think, probably.
Every week, right? And if you're a Patreon subscriber, you get to see them all.
That's right. And Patreon subscribers can also participate in the live show, and we highlight your comments. We get some feedback going. So just another benefit of Patreon, in addition to all the extra content, you know, all the shows that are a little bit less suited for public consumption, where we get a little bit more candid about our clients, our teams, how we manage, you know, Macs and things like that. Great features for patrons there on commandcontrolpower.com.
And if you watch the YouTube video, you could see Sam drink his espresso.
That's right.
Oh, yes. Excuse me.
A very handsome Sam with his Huskies tracksuit on there and his orange banded Apple Watch
Ultra.
Primo.
Hey, this is NCAA tournament time, so go Huskies. I went to the Big East Conference Championship.
We know.
Yeah. Not everyone knows. You know.
We follow you on the Facebook. Those kids say the Facebook, you know?
Yeah.
It was the Facebook in the early days, right? That was technically the name.
Until
Facebook.
Justin Timberlake took it out and took the out in the movie.
In the movie. Probably in real life too.
Yeah.
So have you guys noticed that the Macs are now called laptops? I don't know if this is just me, but you know, when you set a name for a Mac, Jerry, you just set up a Mac. This is a good intro for that topic as well. Like as I've mentioned on the show, we typically set up a Mac with a temporary user account and then get connected remotely and then, you know, handle the migration that way rather than doing the initial migration. So when you set up a new Mac and you put in the username without, you know, migrating data, it used to say, you know, Joe's MacBook Air or Joe's MacBook Pro, right? Now it says Joe's laptop. Just something I noticed. I don't know if it's like a policy change on Apple's side. Why wouldn't they specify? But yeah, that's
things to ponder.
Yeah.
Maybe so Mr. Apple knows something about
Mr.
that.
Apple. Where's the banner?
I cannot disclose.
So, but Jerry, how was your out-of-the-box experience? You were the first among us to get this new M3 MacBook Air. How's it rocking so far? And what was your reason?
Well, I was away the week they released it, and I kind of, you know, of course, I'm away, but I'm really not away because I still like to torment both of you guys via text. And so, you know, my goal was to wind Joe up and get him to buy one, you know, day of release.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He didn't take the bait. But I got home and I've been having a little over 12 months ago when they released the M2 13-inch MacBook Air, I had purchased one with 16 gigs of RAM, a terabyte drive, and I have been, as of late, I would say the last year or so, dealing with an issue where it seems like it's ambient light sensor related, where I'll be off the power cord and it'll go black. And, you know, I've done all the troubleshooting that I want to do. So I didn't know whether something was wrong with it. I didn't want to send it to AppleCare. And I also got that midnight finish, which they supposedly improved with this new release, the re-release of the MacBook Air M3 now. They made the midnight finish a little bit better. But it just it looked like junk. I mean, I don't eat potato chips and use my computer, but it looked horrible. Horrible. So between that and trying to do a support call, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm off the power cord, and the ambient light sensor just kicking the thing off. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I put in what I would get for a trade-in for this one that I just mentioned to you, and Apple's willing to give me $960. So I bought
price, honestly.
That's a great price.
Really, really good, because if you bought that new today, 1 terabyte and 16 gigs, I mean, it wouldn't be what is it, like 1,500, 14, something
Probably
like that. It's like
somewhere around
13,
there.
1,400.
With 1 terabyte, it would be? Oh, okay. I thought it'd be a little bit more. But.
Oh, maybe no, you're right. It'd be I think it would be 1,700, because I just priced one for a client today with half that storage, and I'm pretty sure it'd be like $200 more. Yeah, so she was at 15. Anyway, pretty good deal though.
Yeah, so I replaced So I bought a 24 gigabyte RAM, 13-inch MacBook Air M3 with a 1 terabyte drive. And with the trade-in value, it was $66 a month for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
So, I'm the guy who pays $3.95 for the egg sandwich and doesn't want to pay any more. So that sounded like a pretty good deal to
Was that on
me.
an Apple Card, Jerry? That you did that financing or no?
Yeah, that's the Apple 12-month financing. Yes. And what amazed me was, and I've seen this before, of course, I think I ordered it just a couple days ago. And last night it was in Osaka, Japan. And then this morning it was in, well, actually, I take that back. So the day before yesterday was in Osaka. Before that, it was in Shenzhen. And then it went to Anchorage, and it's like here.
Yeah.
And so it arrived. I know, it's amazing.
It's
It arrived this
amazing.
afternoon, and I had 600 gigabytes to transfer. And I had mentioned these cables before on the show, these faster Thunderbolt cables. And I pulled in all that data in 20 minutes. No exaggeration.
That's
Wow.
incredible,
That's-
honestly.
I know.
Yeah.
So the days of like getting together with clients and saying, "Oh, we'd like to do the migration for you, but you've got X amount of data and we're not going to be able to sit there." I mean, you could do that. You could talk to the client for 20 minutes and do that.
I remember those days. I used to dread the migration days when I had to go to a client, and sometimes I would just take off and be like, "I'll be back in a few hours."
That's exactly what I would do up until, a couple years ago or even a year ago. I was doing that, where I'd set it up and then I'd go out and have that $3.95 egg sandwich, and come back a little bit later. And it was
for the egg sandwich. Yeah.
and it was on my nickel, but so hopefully this one will be a little bit better and a little bit more responsive. So who knows?
Yeah, that's great. Really great. I mean, the progress is incredible, like you're describing. I mean, I've even seen it on Wi-Fi, and I like there, we've seen improvements in terms of the storage devices. Obviously, like we're talking back in the days of rotational drives in an iMac. Maybe it was a 2.5-inch drive in a 21.5-inch iMac or whatever, and they were incredibly slow. Or coming from like the original MacBook Air with that what was it, like a 1.6-inch, drive? It was like this really non-standard, like rotational drive. I mean, you could be sitting there and just watching this thing, like, just trying to get started making progress, and it would take forever. So we would bring him back to our office. Before I had an office, I'd bring him to my home because I just wouldn't want to sit and make small talk. I wouldn't want to drive there and back like you're describing. So we would find workarounds. And then during COVID, we switched to all remote, for migrations. And we realized like, oh, it's actually viable now. And, so you can do that remotely. And for a while we were waiting, it was like, you start the migration and then you're watching the time estimate. You figure it's going to be like 6 hours, whatever you schedule for the next morning, to finish the job. But then you've got all these kind of like half open tickets and you've got to kind of babysit it sometimes. These days, it's like you're describing, even over Wi-Fi, because when I'm remote, I'm not walking them through plugging in cables and things, but we're just using direct peer-to-peer transfer over Wi-Fi. It's fantastic. It's a matter of like sometimes an hour or two, for data like up to several hundred gigs, like you're describing. So it's pretty remarkable because also we don't have to worry as much about Wi-Fi anymore. For a while there, we were like, their Wi-Fi would crap out in the middle, or they just had really poor Wi-Fi service or coverage or whatever. These days, yeah, it's pretty great. You can migrate like it's nothing. So you were describing the ambient light sensor issue. Were there any other issues on your old system besides the potato chip grease and the sensor issue?
It's really hard to tell. I mean, sometimes I would get a little bit of beach balling, and that could have been RAM constrained. My style is not to have a lot of tabs open per se, and I don't use Chrome primarily. I still use Safari. But Chrome, obviously, if I'm using Adigy, I'm going to do that in Chrome. And there's certain things that I do.
Oh, really? I use Safari for Adigy. I know there's been a few things over the years where it worked better in Adigy or in Chrome here and there. But yeah, it's been fine for me in Safari. The only thing I use Chrome for is UniFi these days.
Even that, I find like I don't need Chrome anymore, really,
Oh,
at least
really?
for, yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I know I've told you guys I've been using the Arc browser more and more, but yeah, I found the UniFi sites is perfectly working fine in Safari where it didn't in the past, at least for the
Yeah.
things that I'm doing in there.
Yeah, which is probably the same for me. I should just try it because I guess I'm thinking back to the early days of UniFi where
Yeah.
you would adopt the thing locally and there was like a Chrome like
Yes. Yes.
extension or it wasn't even, it
Yep.
was like a Chrome app or something that you would, it was like a UniFi Chrome app thing that required Chrome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just had to use Chrome. And I think I got in that habit. I just never, I haven't looked this back.
It was like the Ubiquiti device discovery tool, I think is what it was called.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man, those early. I have a whole topic on this. Actually, we can talk about
You have a whole
going
story
back
about
to the
this?
early
Nice.
days. I in fact do have a whole story about this. So yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
I
that's a
was
good. Yeah.
Yeah, I was realizing as I'm looking at like stuff I want to talk about, it's a bunch of UniFi stuff in
Oh,
my
great.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
me too. Me too. I have
it's
a whole thing.
crazy.
So all right, let me lead in, and then we'll talk more about UniFi. I want to hear
Yeah.
your stuff too, Sam. So this came up with UniFi because Tim was on site doing a network installation. And I mean, so basically, like, rewind the clock. We got into UniFi like probably a little bit later than than you guys did, and than most of our colleagues. It was 2017, I think, 2018 when we were doing some of like our first installs. So those are coming due, basically. Like they're coming up for renewal. You need new hardware now. And so a couple tips on that, then I'll get into the issue that happened with Tim on site. So I mean, first of all, my question to you guys is like, how long do you typically estimate for network hardware to last? Same as a Mac, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 if it's like residential. What's your typical guidance on that, Sam?
I mean, I can speak for myself. I think I'm a little bit less aggressive than the 3 to 5 because I mean, it does depend, but like, in 3 years, it's especially if they have multiple access points and different equipment, it could be a little bit of a hefty price to pay with the cost of those access points. So
Yeah.
I give it a little bit of time, especially if everything's fine and the speeds are adequate and everything like that. I'm not pushing the envelope like I am with computers.
Yeah, I mean,
So
if it's your first gen cloud keys, obviously they have
Oh,
to
yeah.
go, or the first gen routers, replace that with a Dream Machine or something like that.
Luckily, those have pretty much all given up the ghost by now anyway. Like they were, I mean, I don't know. I don't have any first gen cloud keys because for a while there, we were like, replacing the ones that just died spontaneously, and then also the ones that were like still going, we were like, these are going to die, we need to come in and replace this. So we did that in some cases within a year of the original install because we just had bad timing on that. And we started to notice like about a year later they all just started crapping out.
Those were horrible. And the design was bad too, the way they would dangle off the router or dangle off the switch.
Yeah.
Like, what was that about? Like, who conceptualized that?
Yeah,
The dangle,
the dangle effect.
Dangle the dongle. Yeah.
Right. So there's those, right? The USG3, those were out when we were first getting into this, and we had a few of those. I think we've pretty much replaced those original gateways. So I mean, I don't think either one of you gave a number. I'm gonna just say the number like 5 to 7 years is probably good for network, hardware. To help you make the case, or to help us make the case, I found a page on UniFi's site. It's just called Identify Your Access Point Model. And they have a whole list, and they list them by generation. So in those early days when we were just getting into this, the UAP AC, the UAP, LR, the long range one, so those were some like the first ones we had experience with. They consider those first generation devices. Second generation would be like the AC Pro. That was one that we used, the ACM Pro, like those mesh ones. Those were some of the ones we used. And the LR, like a new LR version, I guess, long range. Then there's third generation, fourth, fifth, sixth. We're now up to the seventh generation. So it gets a little bit more straightforward here, like with the U7 Pro, that's seventh generation. The U6 line, U6 Mesh, U6 Pro, U6 Enterprise, those are sixth generation, obviously. There was a fifth generation U6 LR. That's so that's the 5th generation device. Anyway, Nano HD was 4th generation. So we went back to some of our original clients and looked up, okay, what do we have? We have an AC still, an AC Pro. The AC Pro is 2nd generation. The AC HD was 3rd generation. So we went through and looked at this and basically said, okay, so here's a client that has, a bunch of 2nd generation and a couple of 3rd generation devices. And fast forward, I mean, basically that's 4 or 5 generations newer now is what they're offering. So it's really easy to make the case when you say that to a client, right? Here's what you have and here's what the state of the art is. And this is how many generations newer this is. And it depends on the cycle, depends on the age. But yeah, that's one way to make the case. What are some of your networks like out there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll chime in, but as you were talking, it just made me think it does depend on the network hardware. If I see some older devices, even if it's just been 3 years, let's say, I might opt for a new U6 or new U7 because that's, not able to handle as many clients or operate as faster speed. So I think I might opt to change my answer as a default number and just look on the equipment base, like a USG. I'm going to change that out. Right. I actually, since it's been a while since I mentioned him, my buddy at the restaurant, I just replaced his USG with a Dream Machine that Jerry would, I did that all for Jerry, of course.
Thank you.
And
take a drink, everybody.
Yeah. And I replaced his old USG with a UniFi Dream Machine, and it was kind of under the bar area, and it was so sticky and dirty from the bar equipment and everything. I'm we got to find a better place for this stuff. I'm this is not good. But it was kind of funny. I was topic for the show, but
exactly.
Yeah, definitely have a variety of network hardware depending on the client and what kind of budget they have and all that stuff.
Yeah,
what about you?
Right.
Yeah.
I think necessity would dictate what to do at a particular client. I think, Joe, in your case, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but you could certainly fish with clients and try to suggest upgrades when they could probably get along for another 12 to 24 months. But if you're looking to, generate work, that's a great page to go to make a case, like you said, for the older generation devices. But I think I'm more like Sam, where something's changed in the environment, or we're not just getting the throughput, or just making a compelling case where you say, look, if we replace all these access points, you can get faster speeds on your devices. And that usually excites people.
Well, I mean, and that's just it. In my case, so, I mean, clients sometimes have issues with Wi-Fi in general. Even if we installed it and we did everything right, there can sometimes just be little things that are not quite perfect for them. So they're usually interested in upgrading their Wi-Fi. And if you can give them some, real specific examples, like you said, new devices that support, Wi-Fi 6, you can get much better speeds. I mean, it's just a fact. And so also it's an opportunity for us to maybe improve the design of the network in some ways, that kind of thing. Simplify, make it more resilient to power issues, whatever. So those are some of our kind of cases to make. And I guess on the topic of the latest generation, I think now that we're at Wi-Fi 7 and we do have hardware that supports it, both in terms of devices that are coming out that support it to connect to Wi-Fi 7, but also obviously the U7 Pro from UniFi, and probably many more to come. It is a good time to consider doing that because it's a pretty significant change. So one of the benefits with Wi-Fi 7 is multi-link operation, which is something that allows your device to connect using more than one frequency at a time. So you can have a device that roams far from an access point that is able to reach, by 2.4 gigahertz, but not by 5 gigahertz. But if you're closer to the access point, it can use the 5 gigahertz kind of simultaneously with the 2.4 to probably drop fewer packets, to have just better bandwidth and stuff like that. So that's a fundamental difference with Wi-Fi 7. That's just one example. Obviously there's more frequencies and things like that. So the case can be made to clients, here's what you're running, here's where we think we can make some improvements. And if, since we've been doing this now with UniFi for about 7 years, we're at that point where some of those old networks really do, would benefit from new hardware. Now, luckily, UniFi, I think, still supports all of the above, right? Like for updates and things. Are there any devices that do you guys know offhand, like if things are not getting updated, if there's like a possible security issue? Because we haven't encountered that yet, but I wonder.
You would see that in your control panel if a
Yeah.
device was end of life and it wasn't getting the updates.
Ah,
The other
okay.
thing, and this is a question for Mr. Apple, I don't think any Apple devices are shipping with 7, correct, at this moment? I think 6E, right?
I think
But,
6E,
Yeah.
so 7's been ratified, but there's no Apple devices, including this new MacBook Air M3.
Send it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have
Well,
to buy
even, I
one
mean,
next year is what that means.
Exactly.
You have
you're-
to.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. Well, I mean, Wi-Fi 6. Yeah, I feel like with that just came out. I didn't even have a chance
Right.
to like really decide. It's like, oh, do
Yeah.
I want Wi-Fi 6? Can I sell it to clients? That kind of thing. Until Wi-Fi 7 came out. So, but to your point, I think Wi-Fi 6, if the hardware supports like Wi-Fi 6E, that is kind of like forward compatible, I guess. Like it's a good thing to have if you're installing a new, UniFi or Eero network or whatever it is. You want to make sure you have at least 6E. So then, so I mean, I don't think we have the end of life issue yet to worry about, but that probably will start to come into play as well. So the thing that happened on site, of course, Tim spec'd out this client's network, and it's a pretty big one, pretty big residence, and something like 10 APs and like a few switches and gateway and whatever. And so he looked at the portal, figured out what we needed, made the proposal, we negotiated with the client, and followed up and got it booked. So he went on site with all the new equipment. So one really nice benefit is that a lot of the current APs can be swapped out and use the existing mounts. So you can just literally like pop the old one off, put the new one in, which is great. However, the thing that Tim didn't realize and I didn't think about and we didn't account for going in.
Can we guess? Can we guess?
Oh, please. Yeah. Guessing
Sam,
game. Okay.
Sam, you go first.
Well, no, you can't just put me on the spot. Can we guess? You said
All right,
you guess.
Sam, you go first.
I know.
All right.
No, I was-
Sam, you go.
Can
I
Sam
was
guess?
being nice. I was being a nice guy.
All right. What's your guess, Jerry? What?
Because you don't have enough power going through from the switch
Oh.
to drive the APs.
Close. Yeah. Okay.
What?
No,
That's
a
not
good,
it?
Well, that's not it. That's not it. No, it comes into play though. You're sort of tangential.
The
Sam,
type,
what
the
do you
type
think
of
it is?
PoE settings on the ports.
No, but that's another
No?
good guess. We can talk about PoE. No. Any other guesses?
Plus.
PoE plus plus plus. No, we'll get to PoE plus plus though. All right. So the issue is that some of those older APs have 2 Ethernet ports.
Yeah,
and none of the current ones do.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay, so
And?
this has not come up for us yet.
And you were
And?
uplinking off of it or feeding off of it.
In a surprising number of cases at one of these clients. So we've just done 2 big network projects, like all new UniFi stuff. One was totally fine and normal. The other one was like, oh, I don't know why, we ended up having to pull off of this AP to like power this, random device that's in a closet where the AP is, or not power, but like provide a wired connection. Or in one case, there was even like a switch that was coming off of an AP that then went to other stuff. I mean, so, and I forget I don't think, anyway, I'm not sure who installed this network on my team. It might not have been Tim. Even if it was like 7 years ago, you kind of make it work.
Could
we
have
were
been
replacing, it could have been you, Jerry, exactly. And we were replacing an older like Ruckus thing that was like under spec for the house when they first built the house. And I've probably talked about this before where they had like 10 100 switches in there and stuff like that, where it's just like, why are you selling the client switches that are like 10 years old? All right. Anyway, so we get there. He figures out that actually there's several cases where there's a second port in use. So examples are the AC Pro, the AC HD. Those are both really commonly used. We've used a bunch of those, and they both had 2 Ethernet ports, which allows the pass-through, obviously. Of course, it was never best practice, but, make it work sometimes. The newer APs, the U6 Pro, the U6 Plus, and the U7 Pro do not have a second port. And I couldn't find any that do. I think only the U6 in-wall, which is like kind of a weird product. It's like it's like an AP that has like a switch in it, and you have Like, so you can take one port that's like your uplink, have an AP, and have a switch built in essentially.
I have one right behind me. Yeah. on the
Oh,
wall.
really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, good product, I guess. I mean, how
Yeah,
does it work?
it's not
Stable?
I don't think it's the U6 version, but yeah, it's a good product. It does exactly what I
Yeah.
need. And I feed a couple of Ethernet ports off of it.
Nice. And does that, I mean, so they call it an in-wall. Do you need to put it in like a box in the wall? Like, how do you,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it fits in like, those electrical boxes.
Like
Just kind of,
like a junction box or whatever.
yeah,
Okay.
that's the word.
Interesting. So that's an option as well. And I'm not sure if we would have used that if we had planned ahead for this, or so anyway, basically the advice is, look at this. And I'm not sure where in the UniFi portal you'd see this, like exactly. I guess you could see that a device has a wired uplink from an AP, if it's just listed that way. So you kind of just want to look at all the wired devices and then see if the uplink is coming from an AP, I guess, if it's a wired device. So what we did was Tim had a couple of these because I like to stock them, and the client had ordered one for one purpose, but he needed like 2 or 3 more. So it's the Flex switch. This is like one of my favorite UniFi products. I've mentioned this switch before. It's a 5-port switch. It can be powered by, yes, you guessed it, Jerry, PoE++, or PoE plus. So it's very flexible. Like you can supply whatever PoE you have
Hence the name.
for the power. And if you're just using it as a switch with no PoE on the sort of downlink ports, you can just again supply regular PoE or a PoE injector or whatever you want. The really cool thing about the Flex switch though is that if you power it by PoE plus or PoE plus plus, it will pass like the lesser version down the line to the connected devices. So in other words, you can have PoE coming from the main switch all the way through the house, and that's going to plug into the Flex switch, powering the switch, and then that's going to pass PoE down to the AP that's connected to that switch. So without having to like route power somewhere and add a switch that way, you can just mount the Flex switch, get power from the rack, and pass the power down the line to like one or more devices. Of course, what you can pass down again depends on what you're passing in. So you may need to spec a better switch up front. So, some of the pro switches, or most, I guess all the pro switches, can provide PoE++ on those ports. Or another way to think about this is like, let's say you do have a network rack, room, network closet, whatever. You can, maybe you've got, a UPS there, battery backup, whatever. Or I'll give you another example of that in a second. So you've got good power, you've got the uplink for your, connection in some closet or some ceiling or whatever. You can just put a power injector, like a PoE++ 60-watt injector or whatever, in the network room and, inject power there where you've got probably a battery backup, et cetera, send it down the line to your Flex switch elsewhere in the house, or in the office. So again, Flex switch, PoE++ on the way in, you get PoE plus on the way out, or regular PoE for access points and other things like that.
The Flex switches, even though they're 5-port, they're not inexpensive. They're like $129 or something like that, right?
They're like 100, maybe more. I forget.
I think they're like $199 or something. I can't remember.
Is that right?
I'll look it up right now because there's another one I want to bring your attention to also, which is called the Switch Ultra. So I haven't had experience.
I mean,
with
that's a lot of scratch for a 5-port switch.
Well, all right, let me get you the pricing because
but the need is great. Sure. I mean, like if you don't have power in that area, it's perfect.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So the Flex mini PoE. So so there's an Ultra. There's now a line called the Ultra. So there's the Ultra switches. There is the indoor. Okay, so Flex. The other thing is that it's an indoor-outdoor switch, so you can actually use this outside. To like take one PoE link coming from inside and pass it down to outdoor stuff as well, cameras, whatever you've got. So the Flex is actually $99 for the 5-port switch. Again, indoor-outdoor, PoE++ on the input side, PoE plus out on 4 ports. Then you've got this new one called, again, the Ultra, which as best as I can tell, it's a very similar feature set where you can provide PoE++ on the way in, and you've got now 7 output ports instead of 4, with the other switch. So it's just basically
and the price on that, Joe? Since
that's $129. Yeah, so
that's
only $129. Yeah, so the Ultra is $129. The Flex is $99. There's also like an Ultra 60-watt, which I think, I don't know, it's maybe gives you more PoE availability, but with different requirements or something like that. There's a 210 watt version. So yeah, these are great products to be aware of, and they really helped in this case where we basically needed to replace an access point that had two devices, the uplink and the downlink, with a switch and an access point, and it works great.
That's awesome. Don't you know those moments though when you're there and you're like that moment of uh-oh.
Yeah.
Like you know what I'm saying? Like all the equipment's there, they spent all this money, you're like, oh shit.
Oh yeah, totally.
Exactly.
It's exactly what happens. And then furthermore, there's always this like erosion of the technical capital, like I like to say, where it's like you're there, you're all geared up to go. The client is planning this day, actually it was a 2-day job, right? So like Tim is, there on the first day getting half the stuff configured and then finding, oh crap. And now the client's like, oh, like if you didn't realize that, what else didn't you think of, or whatever.
Knocks you down
and in
a
fact,
notch.
then you have compounding issues where at this one client, it went from bad to worse. It was like something we could handle. The network's up and running. Everything's fine. He, installed some of the main stuff, ordered the switches, was planning to go back. Gets a call later that day that this TV is not working. One of their TVs wasn't working. So he's like, okay, gives the client some instructions, like just power cycle the little, I forget which device, like maybe the cable box and the whatever wasn't working, like the universal remote or something. So she's like, okay, we'll try that. So fast forward a couple hours and now the network's down. And we're like, what's going on here, guys? Wow. And so client had.
Don't you hate that? Let me interject. Don't you just? Isn't that just like your stomach is in knots? You're back at the office, and it just it ruins everything.
You're like, what the heck happened here? And now.
And why am I in this business? And why did
I? Exactly.
Rethink your life choices. Exactly.
Yes. Totally. Yes. So Tim finds out that the client had her builder there, and the builder said, okay, I can do that, reboot the stuff for the TV, whatever. So he goes into the network closet, nowhere near the TV, and he sees the new stuff in the rack, and he sees a reset button, and he holds it down, and he just reset the controller and gateway back to factory settings, takes everything offline. So luckily the client was like, so we're like,
you needed a MacWorks do not touch sticker on this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, that was actually a MacWorks do not Jack. Jack's last name, Jack Daniels.
Oh, yeah,
Daniel.
Yeah.
JD Strong.
JD Strong. That was a JD Strong sticker that. He sent me this. So we have to give him credit.
It's so true though. There's been a few examples of that recently where I thought I really should have something on here that says like who to call if there's an issue, or like, I mean, now I understand the stop, do not freaking touch this thing. Like, why? Like, I mean, I don't know what the guy was thinking. Like, why would you do that? So Tim connects remotely to the client's laptop through like a personal hotspot, whatever. Readopts the thing somehow, and then like has to restore a backup. Turns out only had the backup from the previous one because he only got halfway through the job, didn't back up the progress, whatever. Like, it kind of worked, gets the network back up and running, has to go back to basically readopt everything. And then, so it was.
Was this like, client in area for you or kind of far away?
I mean, like it was like a 45-minute drive.
Oh, okay. Yeah. For me, that's my closest client.
That's your normal. Yeah.
It's a normal drive.
Supermarket for Jerry.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. No, it was not easy to resolve that. And of course, again, it's all in the context of like, oh, there was a little oversight. So then I'm, of course, as a business owner wondering like, how much is the client wondering? Is this oversight related? Is this because of this? Well, I know it's not related, but like, well, this all could have gone much smoother. And it turned, you just wonder if they have a question mark in their head about this now, and luckily she was fine. I talked to her the next day. And it turns out the TV hadn't been working before the visit. So it was not even related to the network job. Like, so I have him on the phone. The client has me on speakerphone and the builder is there. So we're talking about this. When she called me, oh, this was the other thing. The next day, her heat doesn't work. And we're like, oh man, now I'm like, Tim, what the heck's going on here? And so I go in and she's like, I don't know how to log into Honeywell. I'm trying to reset my password. She's like, I just get this broken link when I try to reset my password. And I'm like, maybe it's related. Maybe the company's having an issue. Like maybe it's not the network. I'm like, all
Yeah.
signs point to we screwed something up with the
Yeah.
network, like whatever. So, and the whole reason the heat's not working in this one area, she couldn't control the heat. So I'm like, that's probably network related, you know, like this one device
Yeah.
didn't get plugged in or whatever. But she's trying to reset her password. It's not working. So we go online and I see, sure enough, Honeywell, their service is down. This was the day that like Google was down and Facebook was down. And there were like a bunch of, you know, mysterious outages. So Honeywell was one of them. So that's why she couldn't reset her password. I'm like, that's probably why this thing is not working. So then we find that there's also a Honeywell device in this one area that like in a crawl space that Tim wasn't even in, is the cable was loose. So she goes and plugs in the cable and then the device lights up. She still couldn't get into the system because their site's down, but at least the device was like online. So now the heat's going to work again. So it's just like this comedy of errors that all stem from like this other completely unrelated thing. So I'm talking to her about this thing. I'm like, okay, if you find the Honeywell thing, because it does look like the one is offline, the system thing hopefully will be fixed on its own. The Honeywell, if you can find it, I just want you to unplug it from power for 2 minutes and plug it back in. Don't do anything else. Like I'm telling her, you know, I'm like, don't reset it or anything like that. So she starts laughing. The builder is there on speakerphone. He hears me saying like, whatever you do, don't reset anything. You know, she's laughing like, we won't, we learned our lesson. Sorry. You know, so later to top it all off, she says to me, I'm so sorry to like, you know, freak out and imply that this was like your fault. None of this was your fault. You know, thank you so much. Whatever.
Wow.
Like she was very apologetic. Yeah. So
That's
lesson learned, make sure you're not using that second port on the access point. And if you are, the flex switch can save the day.
Wow. You did have a whole story about this.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, what do you have UniFi related? Because I got one more thing I can mention to the listeners, but what's your UniFi stuff?
Well, I was doing an upgrade of a client network. Well, really I was replacing the firewall, which was a Zywall, and they already had UniFi access points from their previous company. They had switched over to us. So I'm like, let's get a UDM Pro in there and let's, you know, readopt all the access points. So like, well, we can't be down during the day, so you got to do it at night. So I'm like, fine, I'll go late at night. Really didn't want to, but I had no choice. So I did it after hours. I was in the building all by myself, which is a little creepy, this particular building. And I kept finding random switches in like closets and areas. I'm like, oh, like unmanaged switches in all these different places.
Wow.
So that was a problem. But anyway, so to get to the heart of the matter, we had already taken in their access points into our offsite UniFi controller. So they were adopted through the set and form command, and they were running on our own controller. Right. So we were going to go in there, put in the UDM Pro, and then just readopt them through the UDM Pro. So I went there. I had pre-configured the UDM Pro to have the static IP, to have all the settings as the Zywall for VLANs and all that stuff, so it would make it easy. So I popped it in, and network came right back up. I was like, cool, that's working well. Now I just got to go to the other piece. So I'm like, I have an idea. I'll go and I'll grab the backup from my offsite controller and just restore it. And I'll just, I had this thought that I'd get all the Wi-Fi networks and all these other pieces in. So this is where it goes sideways. So I go and I grab, first of all, there was one cool thing. You know how if you have multiple sites, at least as far as I remember, when you grab a backup, it's all the sites in that backup. I don't think, if I remember, that you can grab a particular site. But I grabbed that multiple site backup and I brought it to the UDM Pro, and it said, oh, this looks like this backup has multiple sites. Which site would you like to restore from? So I was like, that's cool. I didn't know you could do that. It was just total accident. So I picked my site, restored it, and it finished. And I was connected locally to that UDM Pro. So I saw it come back up. I'm like, okay, let me continue on. I start to go and readopt all the access points, and they all just go adoption failed, adoption failed, adoption failed, all throughout the office. I'm like, what? So I'm like, all right, there's one in reach. So I'll reset it. And I'll see what happens. Yeah. Right? Boom. Adoption failed. I'm like, what the F? And I'm like, I can't figure this out. And you know how those days when you're also like punchy and it's like 8 o'clock at night and you're just like, what am I doing wrong here? So I could not figure out why. Then I looked in all the portal of all the devices, again, connected locally. and they were all saying 192.168.1.20 as their IP. Do either of you guys know why they were showing that particular IP?
So my guess was going to be that set inform command issue. Like, so there's a method to specify in the controller, like the address of like where to look for the controller or something like that. I forget because I don't run that, but like
That's
know
the
that
recovery IP of the controller, right?
Of the device.
Did you get it?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
of the cloud key, or of the, what do you mean of the device?
it's the default IP that the device gives itself when there's no DHCP.
Okay, so you were okay. Go ahead. So what was it then?
So then I'm like, but I was trying for like a good half hour to 40 minutes, going, why? I'm resetting, and I'm like, why won't this work? And then
before you saw they were all had the same IP address.
Yes. So I'm like, oh crap. So I dig deeper, and it turns out that even though I had the UDM Pro all set up, ready to rock and roll, when I had restored the backup, that backup was assuming a different firewall, so DHCP was off.
Got it.
So I restored and turned off DHCP across the network.
Oof.
And so all the APs they wouldn't get an IP address.
Right.
So I wiped out all my VLANs and all the settings that I had originally set up off-site. I totally effed myself when I was there. Yeah. It was just a big, stupid mistake.
Wow.
But it took a while for me to figure out. And then as soon as I figured that out, I set the DHCP scope, and boom, all the APs started to show up. They adopted just fine. And I was like, at this point, it was like 9 o'clock at night. I was like, thank goodness, because I was starting to freak out. It's just like, I got an hour and a half drive home. It's 9 o'clock. What am I going to do here? They're going to come in the morning and be like, nothing works.
Right.
So it's that oh shit moment again that you're feeling like, why am I here? Why do I do this job for a living? This sucks.
Right.
Yeah. I know because you've mentioned this on the show before, that's kind of like your workflow where you get the stuff and you set it up ahead of time, thinking you'll save time, save headaches and stuff like that. And I can't say like, oh, well, I would configure it on site, because I do this all the time. I don't do it all the time, but it's a compelling case to just say out of the box. I mean, it used to be UniFi was a little janky out of the box and things wouldn't work and configure, but it's gotten so much better. I'd almost, think like maybe you should do it on the fly next time,
Yeah, maybe. I think my thought process, and this obviously was not the case this time, is it would save me on-site time because I'm sitting in the comfort of my office. But I screwed myself this time, so it was the total opposite effect. But had I done it right, I think it would have been an easy install and readoption because you got to set the static IP on the device, make sure it can get online, and you know what? This in this case, Jerry, you might be right. It might be like 6 of 1. Could have just done it on site and be done with it.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about this recently too, because in those early days, we were doing the same thing. We were, pre-staging it in our office. We had a static IP that we could use, unused from the rest of our network, or you just cascaded off of your existing network, whatever. And you configure and adopt and update, and like it's great because you're going to have to do that. And like you said, Sam, you can spend the time in the comfort of your own home or office or whatever and get it all, get half the work done and then just go and plug and play, just, install it in the rack and put in the APs and everything just lights up and it works. But yeah, I think you're right, Jerry, that it's much like it's more stable. We don't at that point in time, it was the comfort factor, but also like, let's, test it out and make sure it's all good because we weren't so sure in those earlier days. Mm-hmm. And these days it's been fine. And so we've just been doing it just on the fly like that. But we did have one other UniFi case where the UDM, we needed a backup basically. So we do stock like a UDM as a backup, and Tim needed it on site. And the issue was that this client had Comcast. We don't often have Comcast. I know you do, Jerry, and you haven't had this issue. I don't think it was a Comcast issue, but that was like one variable that like Tim and I think we're stuck on, like maybe this is a Comcast thing, like what the heck's going on? The issue was when we first installed he installed the UDM, like adopted some stuff and then tried to update the UDM. The first update works and the second update like it just takes the whole network down. And the UDM reports on the front, like no cable connected, like no uplink, no WAN, nothing connected to the WAN port. So the only solution he found was he like reconfigured a brand new device and like stopped short of that update and got the thing working. So, I mean, that's just the one counterpoint to like this stability stuff of like out of the box. I don't know if the UDM was part of it. I don't know if a certain update, you know, past a certain point, like you couldn't go back in time. I don't know. But so having the extra device was pretty crucial in that case. But yeah,
for sure.
Sam, the backup thing though is curious too, because we had this issue come up where a client moved and a person bought their house and they wanted to keep all the equipment except for the controller, basically. So we replaced a UDM like SE with the standard, like a cheap, you know, UDM, right? So we took the backup of the UDM SE, installed the brand new UniFi Dream machine, or maybe it's a UniFi Dream router, I forget which one, restored the backup of the prior controller to the new device, and you know, everything worked. Everything was adopted, like it's all just fine. Yeah. And that was great because the client was moving, taking the expensive piece, you know, with her to the new home and just leaving behind the access points and all the other infrastructure and selling that as part of the home. So did all that. Everything was fine. Fast forward to one of the recent UniFi updates, and that new client, so like, let's say the old name was, you know, Smith family, and the new name was Johnson family, right? So the controller in the list in the UniFi portal started showing as the old client name. Even
I've seen that.
Like forever it's been showing the correct name. And like, why did it revert? We didn't even know that name was still in there. So what I think happened was, and I'm curious if you have a thought, Jerry, on having seen that, but I think it was restoring the backup of the like more high-end device that supports multiple sites to a device that I assume doesn't support multiple sites, so that the name of like the site was actually embedded in there with the original name, but is no longer relevant to the new device. So it was just like masked out, not shown, whatever. There's no place you can even change it because, again, it's like a device that doesn't support multiple sites anyway. So that's my theory. So I reached out to UniFi support. They needed more info, whatever, back and forth a couple times, never heard anything back. And one day I just noticed it's fine now. So they like did something. I don't really know. They either changed the portal design or they like went into my controller and fixed it. I don't know, but like it's working now. So yeah, where have you seen that, Jerry? It's a message of backups. Yeah.
Just changing the name of the site on the controller, and then in the portal, it not honoring that change. And then one day it was finally reading the right customer's name.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, because I've seen generic ones too, where it would be like UDM SE. And I'm like, well, no, we named this, you know, like, why is that showing? Yeah. So
you know
it's weird. You know?
What I found is helpful, instead of putting the client name sometimes, is to put the street number and the street, like 34 Sagamore, and just that's what you call it, the site. And that seems, it's agnostic and
look at you.
Yeah, look at me go. Hey, before we leave the Ubiquiti UniFi corner, I had purchased a couple months ago the cable internet that works with Comcast, Charter, Cox, and I couldn't get rid of it. I couldn't install it right away because then I realized that when we bought this place, we had inherited an alarm system that was outbound calls were still on the copper line. So I needed to reach out to the alarm guy to convert it to a VoIP sent email message or voice message or whatever, alarm alert notification, that would use VoIP and not use the copper line anymore. So I got that done and I was really excited, and I put the router in, put the modem in, $279. And I was getting slower speeds than the one that Xfinity was telling me that they had decommissioned and were no longer supporting. It was a Netgear Blackhawk. So, a lot of the Netgear products are called that. And I was getting somewhere on 80 megabits up and over 1,000 down, right? And that's kind of what I'm paying for because my area doesn't support higher upload speeds. Yeah. And so I put in this Xfinity router and I was getting 38 megabit upload speeds. I keep saying router, but I mean modem.
Yeah.
So I was checking the different forums, and I finally got resolution on Reddit just by following some threads on Reddit. And some people were saying that you needed to reach out to Xfinity and petition them to reprovision the modem, the new modem that I put in, by initializing it with the correct boot file. It just pulls down the wrong boot file for some reason.
Interesting.
And so it took 2 hours of like chat back and forth, but I wasn't using Xfinity chat through my phone. I was using Reddit chat because they have their own channel on there. And finally went through a number of agents, and it literally took 2 hours, but now, I finally got higher speeds than the one I decommissioned. So,
Nice.
There's not much to the product. It's just one Ethernet jack in the front and just a little display on the far left, like most of the Ubiquiti products have. But, finally it's working properly.
So do you anticipate, like, is this something that we'd have to watch out for, or is just like an issue with Xfinity in particular?
It could be. It could very well be. Or if you're, I would definitely, before you swap modems, check your speeds, and because they're calling this particular device, even though they don't make it, Xfinity, because Xfinity would love to sell you the products that they're selling their clients or renting to their clients, but they're calling it like a next generation product. And for a long time in the forums, I thought that my area hadn't had the proper profiles sent to the area, because I guess a lot of this is regional. I don't know. It just seems like mumbo jumbo to me.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, I agree. Well, I've been for the longest time looking for some kind of standard recommendation I can make for, cable internet providers. I mean, we've been using Optimum. We talk about them on the show sometimes. Their equipment has gotten worse. Their support has gotten worse. Service, the fact that they haven't really increased their speed, at least in terms of upload. I'm curious what you're getting now that it's working. Were you getting more than 80 megabits on the upload speed, Jerry?
No, with the Netgear one that they said was, and this was a DOCSIS 3.1 Netgear Blackhawk modem. But the reason why I had it in service, because it was an EMTA modem, so it could do phone. So that's the caveat, is that if your client needs an EMTA modem, you can't use this UniFi product.
Yeah,
they just have to. Yeah. So sometimes it's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting 110, whereas I was getting only an 80 upload speed.
Either one of those is good. I mean, compared to Optimum, they're like 35 standard, and I think you can pay for more. If you pay for one of their like really high end things, you get 50 megabits on the upload, but I don't think they go faster than that. And like I said, their equipment is not great anymore. They use these, modem router combos,
cheap
stuff, and like and like they never support bridge mode, even if they like might support bridge mode. I don't rely on it because of kind of the issues like the mumbo jumbo stuff where like they send an update and then stuff happens and like it doesn't work anymore and it goes out of bridge mode, or just crazy stuff like that.
Right.
And so I'm looking for, and I've asked them, like I've had clients ask them for recommendations, like, what's the modem that you have? I mean, surely you have a list in your support stuff that you could just say, here's the model number of a modem that we would recommend.
Xfinity does, and they do support that list and update it quite frequently.
Well, apparently for Optimum, either they don't, or we've had two cases now. So one case was the issue you're describing where there's no phone line on the modem. So they, Optimum recommended to my client, this is the model you need. I forget if we ordered it or we just looked it up or whatever, but there's no phone built in. And I asked the client, you still have phone on there, right? Yes. So Optimum recommended a modem that like would have, not worked for this one client. And then in this other case where the Optimum recommended a modem, we had the client order it. We go to the house to switch the modem to the new one, provision it, and install UniFi. So we get there to do that, and the modem, it didn't work. And, the client talked to another tech, had to have Optimum come out to her house. Now she has no internet, whatever. And they said, oh, this modem's not compatible. And she was like annoyed with us. And I'm like, I got that number from you. Like, you talked to Optimum. They told you that number. You told me. I gave you the link. You bought it. Like, So it's just like this is like literally step 0 of anything we do is like the client having internet, and like why can't we just have a good ISP locally where we have a modem that we can recommend that's reliable, you know? So I wish they would make this thing for Optimum, or Optimum would support it, but I think like you said, it's only specific providers where
it's Cox, Charter, and Comcast. But the interesting thing is that they will support Comcast Business. You know, and most times you see them clinging to in their cold dead hands their Xfinity gateways that they want to sell to businesses. But I'm surprised. But I'm looking at the webpage here, and it's supported.
I'm glad you have that, at least in your area. The other thing that Optimum has been doing is they're switching clients to fiber. You know, they're just whatever. It's marketing. They recommend that they put the thing on the door. They say, you know, we want to switch you to fiber. I don't know why. Anyway, they get these clients convinced to just make this switch. Maybe they're going to save money or something. So the clients always call us after. They're like, Optimum was here. Now nothing works. I'm like, great. You know, glad, you know, thanks for keeping us posted about that. And
after the fact,
you know, after the fact, right? Now I'm scrambling.
Can you come this afternoon?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, they waited 2 weeks for the appointment from Optimum. You know, now they need me today. So it's like, great. So I've had a couple of these come up now where if they had the UniFi system, out of the box, UniFi is using whatever IP. The I forget what it might be, like 192.168.0. You know, whatever, or 1. Whatever. So Optimum comes in, puts in their fiber thing, which is a modem and router like unit, which then is using the same IP as the UniFi gateway. So basically, like the solution is, you know, connect to the gateway locally and just change the IP schema, reboot, and you're good to go. So to your point earlier, Jerry, about like the house address, this takes me back to the days when we would have to like anticipate maybe needing VPN into a client, you know, and we would change the IP schema to something like the street address. You know, if they're at number 24, you know, any street, you make the IP schema 192.168.24. Whatever, just as a way of kind of making up a number. You know, that's like what we did. And so you know, now it's like, I think part of our plan should be change the IP schema, because if some Optimum person comes in and, you know, switches out their system, you could have a conflict, and then that causes all kinds of issues.
Yeah, I think in general, I like the idea of always changing the default IP scheme, you know, just to play it safe for situations like that. But also just, you know, the 192.168, if you ever, like you were saying, I think earlier, with like connection to VPNs and stuff like that, you're going to have some sort of where it thinks it's on the network, but it's not, kind of a situation.
Right. Yeah, the local and the remote like need to be different, you know, in that scenario. And even though VPNs are like really much less used these days, and certainly that was only something we ever cared about in business. Now I think, you know, it's maybe a good idea to do that in a residential setting anyway, just to avoid the possibility of this kind of conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got anything else on UniFi as we wrap up?
Always tons of stuff on UniFi, but got to leave something for the people in the future, right? So
maybe we'll talk about this in a Patreon show. But yeah, the mission critical switch. I finally had. I finally had some experience with that. Worked out well. Seems to be a great product so far. And as far as I can tell, it operates as a UPS. You know, so you can. Obviously it's designed to like power the UniFi stuff, but you can also, it has an AC port, so you can plug in anything. But obviously I wouldn't plug in, you know, high power draw stuff, but we have the cable modem, you know, like a couple of
curling
other switches and things. Yeah. Right. Oh, don't get me started about that. I have a client who brought down their whole network and server with a space heater plugged into one of the battery backups.
Nice.
So that was like really not good.
Nice.
But yeah. So yeah, the Mission Critical is a good product also for that. Lithium ion battery inside there. You know, it's silent, so it's a great UPS if you need generator compatible. But yeah, we'll talk more about that.
Sounds good, gents.
Yeah. All right. Any humor to wrap us up, or any other closing remarks, guys?
Interject humor here. Go for it, Jerry. Just like you put me on the spot earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
TV recommendations. I'm a little bit late to it. Amazon Prime Video, if you've got that, there's 2 seasons of something called Clarkson's Farm, which is Jeremy Clarkson, who's known in the racing world. He's British, but he's a commentator and has his own programs about racing. So you might know him from there. He bought this farm in England, this rural farm, many acres, and he decided to take up farming. And his pockets are really deep, and it's a pretty interesting journey that he goes on.
Nice. Great
Well, that's
tip.
cool.
Yeah, I like that. I'll probably be interested in that. All right. Well, no humor though. So that's,
Yeah, go ahead.
No, there's nothing funny about Ubiquiti equipment. It's all seriousness tonight.
that's right. Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that I'm not sure how amusing it is, but it made me chuckle earlier. I was talking with a wiring contractor that does runs wires. He's talking about all these tough jobs and does his security cameras. And he just says to me, I'm like, oh, this would be a good connection. We could work together. He's like, yeah, UIT people, you don't do a lot of physical work. So we do all that. I'm like, wait, what?
Excuse me.
Okay. Touche, good man.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, he could have been talking about you personally, Sam, and that would be true. Yeah.
All right, guys. Another good show. Everybody stay tuned and visit commandcontrolpower.com and support us on Patreon for even more great content and more behind the scenes stuff. Cheers, guys.